Howdy folks. Today we are going to go over a continuation of Mongo attributes or actions. We're going to be looking at update and delete. So we've covered creation and read at this point. Once we do update and delete, that will be all the CRUD operations available in Mongo. So looking back, brief overview of the project we have. We have our connection to Mongo. We're not using Mongoose yet. We will get to that. But we are using Mongo to do this whole connection. We've got a single API that is using the users collection in the database. Now what I've done here is, what I'd like to do is I'd like to add a couple more fields to Mongo, to our table, right? And we're going to use those for our update. So if I want to add them, I can just put email, and then I'm actually going to create an array called books and set it to an empty array. That works perfectly fine. If I insert that data, that'll be fine, even though it is not similar to the data that is already in the database. Let me show you what I mean. So with the server started up, I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new user, and I'm going to put in an email now. Email, whoops, .com. Just add ones to that, send that. All right, you see I get the acknowledge, the insert ID. If I go to Compass, refresh this, you can see the new data here. Zoom in on this, I can. So we've got our old bunch of data there. The other two objects, or three objects in here that have the username and the password. This new one is the one I just inserted that also has the email and the books. Now this, at this point, the database has kind of diverged. So there's three old users that have those, that don't have email or books fields, and there's one that does. Now Mongo has some tricks for working around that, but at this point you need to be careful in your code to make sure that you're dealing with these two different user data styles. Because, like, let's say if you're trying to check an email, well, some of these users might not have an email. So you need to take that into account in your code, in your program, because the database won't do it for you. All right, so now that we've got that, we've got our email, our books. Let's just copy this object here, and I'm going to go into update user. Update user is a put. It takes an ID. It has a content type header because, again, put and post are similar in that they have a body. And here's the body. This is going to change this email, but it's going to add these books. 2 books. It's going to add them to the array. That's why we made an array of books, which Mongo can do quite easily because it is a document store. We don't need to do a bunch of complicated stuff with tables like we did with SQL. All right, so let's see. Let's take a look at this put. Okay, so we've got ID, we've got email, we've got books. So the first thing we want to do, as remember up here, when we're finding our user, we have to use object ID in our search. So the command to update something, there's multiple, but the one we're going to use is called updateOne. So we say db.collection user, I think it's user, right? Users, which again is the name of our collection, dot updateOne. Now updateOne takes 2 parameters. The first one is the filter, indicating what should we update. If we don't put in a filter, it's just going to update the first one, which in the document in the entire collection, which is not what we want. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say ID, object ID, and then I'm going to pass ID into it. Just like we did for the find up here. This is the equivalent to the where clause. We are looking for this ID. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our update. So you'd expect to be like, okay, email and books, right? Unfortunately, no. That is not actually how Mongo works, because this doesn't tell it anything. This is essentially similar to telling it it's a where clause. So what we need to do is we actually need to tell it an operation. This is how Mongo works. Any object that you pass into it, fields like this, they have to be part of an operation for it actually to care about them. What do I mean by operation? Well, if I run email like that, or actually just in shorthand like this, it won't do anything. What I have to do is I have to tell Mongo, $, and the $sign tells Mongo, here's an operation I'm going to be performing. Set email books. Okay, so that is going to set these properties. Why do we have to do that? That's just how Mongo's set up. They're set up so that we have to call, we have to use set. We can't just put the keys in, like if we were doing the creation, wherever that is, creation here. All right, so let's give that a try. Let's see what happens. All right, we're going to go and put. Oh, actually, one other thing, we need to wait. We need to actually, we want to have a callback or something interesting happen when this is finished, right? We don't just want to return a 200 before it's done because we don't actually know that it's done. So similar to other parts of Mongo, we need a callback and result. I'm just going to go and copy this from here. Cannot update user and result. Let's give that a try. All right, it started. We're going to go in here. We have update user. We have our ID in here. We have our body with email and books. Just double check that that is the correct one. Email and books. Excellent. Send. All right, acknowledged, modified count 1, matched count 1. That's pretty good. That seems to work. And if I go into Compass and I refresh it, I can see that my email has been changed and the books have been changed. Awesome. Well, let's try to run that again, and let's get rid of, well, let's leave the email, and then let's add a couple more books. All right, book 3 and 4. Let's push those in. Run that, and now if we go here, we refresh. You can see it overrode that array. That's not what we wanted. We actually wanted, and well, to be fair, in a put, that might be what you actually want. Strictly in a put, you should be resetting, but in this case I actually wanted those books to be appended, not overridden like that. So what are we missing? Well, if we take a look here, we did actually specifically tell Mongo to override this books array. That's what this is saying. It's saying set books. We actually need to do something a little different, and that involves another operator. Push. So you can kind of see how these work, right? Set overrides the field. Push, I bet you can guess what that does. It takes the data that you're giving it and appends it onto an array. So see, this is why we have these fields, because otherwise how does Mongo know if I give it an array? How does it know if I want to add that array onto the end or if I want to replace the value completely? Remember, Mongo doesn't care about type. If book started out as an array and I want to override it with a single string, it doesn't care. So if I said books, new book, Mongo's going to say, yeah, that was an array, but I'm just going to override it. So that's why we have set versus push, because that tells Mongo specifically what action are we taking on this field. What are we doing here? So let's push books and let's see what happens. And this should append them onto the end. Okay, so we go in here, book 3, book 4, run that. Okay, refresh. Okay, we got an array. Now look at what it did. It did exactly what we told it to. It took the array that we gave it and appended that array onto the existing array. So now we have a nested array, book 3, 4, and then an array containing book 3 and 4. Well, I don't really want that. I want to concatenate those things. I want, if I put here again now, book 5 and book 6, I want that to go on the end of the array as book 5 and 6. I don't want that array to be pushed onto the end of the array. But Mongo doesn't know that. I didn't tell Mongo that. All I said is push books. So there's another operator. I say push books each. Books. Confusing, yeah. What this is saying, this particular books is not referring to this variable. It's referring to the field in Mongo. In fact, let me put that in quotes just to make that clear. So what this is now telling Mongo is it's saying, okay, set the email, overwrite whatever's in there. Now append onto the books variable every value in this array. So you can see, like, even though it's a little confusing, we've got these operations, Mongo is using them so that it can allow you to be clear about what you're trying to do. Remember, we didn't have this problem in SQL because SQL has a specific language already for appending arrays and doing all that stuff because it also doesn't really handle arrays. Mongo does, so it has to handle this stuff in a different way. Okay, so now we've got this push and this each. Let's take another look. Let's rerun this. Modified, matched, and if I refresh, all right. Now you see 3, 4. We have this unfortunate array here, and then 4 and 5. So now it's appending the items onto the array appropriately. What about deletion? Now we've got all this put, all this stuff is in there. Well, a little confusing, but it's there. Deletion. Well, deletion is very similar. We say db dot collection users dot deleteOne. Again, it takes 2 parameters. It takes the well, this, you could see it does actually do a promise. So you can promisify these if you want. If you want to use async await, that's totally fine. So you could say dot then. So again, we want the ID, object ID. Now, why are we putting the ID in there? Because otherwise it's just going to delete the first document it finds. We don't want that. Error result. And again, just going to grab this handy dandy stuff, cannot delete user, and then we'll just return the result. The result should be the document that got deleted, which can be kind of useful sometimes. So let's take a look at that. Oops. So I'm going to go and keep this ID. We're going to go in here. This is the delete with the ID. I send that. Acknowledge true, deleted count 1. Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't return the actual object. It returns the acknowledgement. I refresh, and the object is gone. So that is how you update in Mongo. And update, that you can update multiple, but it has a very similar format where you're just saying anything that matches the filter in here, update all of them. If I said update many and just gave the same ID, it would still only update one because the ID is only going to match one document. But it's also just a nice little extra that says, oh, you know, only update this one object. So this is pretty quick, and we haven't gone super deep into a lot of the update stuff, but I did want to go through and explain why Mongo uses operations the way it does. It's just because there's no other good way to have clarity on what it's actually doing. But yeah, next time we'll hopefully go into subdocuments and a little more complicated stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in class.